The Influence of Modern Art, Chapter 13. Amid the social, political, cultural, and economic turbulence of the early 20th century, visual art and design experienced a series of creative revolutions that brought attention to the role of art and design in society, in addition to the long-held values and approaches to organizing space in question. This is a loaded chapter with 5 styles that you'll need to identify for our exams. Learning to split these styles will mean that you can visit a museum and really impress your friends and family. I teach this course in person as well as online, and at the end of the semester, we always visit the San Diego Museum of Art to test our skills. I want to empower you to really see style in this course, so thanks for your attention with this particular chapter. We're taking a look at the timeline because the emphasis of this chapter is on the modern movements, specifically Cubism, 1907 to 1914, followed by Futurism, 1909 to 1914, then Dada, 1916 to 1930, Surrealism, 1924 to 1966, and Expressionism, 1905 to 1930. We're going to get started with Cubism. This is the most important and influential fine art movement. It abandoned perspective, which brought a new dimension to painting. And realistic modeling of figures was absolutely rejected. Now things were portrayed from various angles. European artistic traditions were abandoned, and there was illusions of space from fixed viewpoints. Some of the influences included African masks and Iberian sculptures, as well as the use of non-art materials like collage or newspaper. So here are the style characteristics for Cubism. Analytical Cubism has a monochromatic palette, and I'll show you what that looks like. There's a faceting of surfaces. The best way that I can think to explain this is if you think of a diamond or a gemstone and the way it's cut into different facets. So when you look at it, you can kind of look at that gemstone from different perspectives. Well, this is very similar to what the Cubist artists were doing. They also used geometric shapes and simultaneity. So for example, if they're looking at a subject, they're viewing it from several angles at once. The subject remains stationary and the viewer moves. So Picasso, for example, in La Demoiselles d'Avignon, had live models, and instead of just staying put, he drew them from beneath them, beside them on the left, then on the right, and then above. And he combined all those facets, all those perspectives into one image, which is why Cubism has the look that it does. Here are some examples. These are, of course, works by the famous Spanish painter Pablo Picasso, and these were the genesis of Cubism. He was very influenced by Iberian and African tribal art. Now, Africa is very close to Spain. He also loved the work of the French post-impressionist painter Paul Cézanne, who treated nature differently in terms of the cylinder and the cone. He was abstracting nature into a different way of seeing. 2 forms of Cubism emerged: analytical Cubism, which is represented by Picasso and his close colleague Georges Braque, and synthetic Cubism, represented by someone like Juan Gris. In analytical Cubism, the planes of the subject matter are analyzed from different vantage points, as I described, and then assembled into a rhythmic composition of geometric planes. In synthetic Cubism, the artist drew invented forms that are based on past observations. These were signs rather than any kind of representation of the subject matter. In other words, the essence of the object was depicted as opposed to its outward appearance. Now, Picasso started drawing at a very young age, and his drawings as a child show him for the genius that he was. But he went through different periods, including the blue period, which you see there in the middle, followed by this image, which is the nude woman with the necklace. And here you see Cubism and those different vantage points starting to emerge. On the left, we see an African tribal mask, and Pablo Picasso collected African art and masks. On the right, we see one of his very famous paintings from 1907, La Demoiselles d'Avignon. It's in the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art, and it portrays 5 nude female prostitutes in a brothel on a street in Barcelona. Each figure is depicted in a rather disconcerting, confrontational manner, and none is conventionally feminine. The women even appear slightly menacing and are rendered with angular and disjointed body shapes. The 3 figures on the left exhibit facial features of the Iberian style of Picasso's native Spain, while the 2 on the right are shown with African mask-like features. I was fortunate to teach design for a short time in Madrid, and in the Museo Reina Sofia you can find this remarkable, very large painting, Guernica. It's gray, black, and white, and it was done at Picasso's home in Paris. It's regarded by many art critics as one of the most moving and powerful anti-war paintings in history. It's also one of Picasso's best-known works. He created it to express his absolute outrage over the Nazi bombing of a Basque city in northern Spain, and that was ordered by General Franco. Since then, this absolutely monumental black and white canvas has become an international symbol of genocide committed during wartime. Really a visual account of the devastating and chaotic impact of war on men, women, and children, in this case specifically on civilian life and communities. Picasso completed the painting in Guernica in 1937, which was a time of widespread political unrest, not just in Spain but worldwide. World War II would have been just a couple of years later and would devastate the European continent. In Guernica, we see victims of the bombing, some still living and some already dead. A figure sprawled in the foreground of the painting appears to be a corpse and is framed on both sides by living victims with their heads thrown back, wailing in agony. The figure to the left is a mother clutching her baby who appears to have died during the bombing. Humans and animals are jumbled together in a background of broken, hard-edged geometric shapes reminiscent of Cubism. The newspaper print background texture of the horse is also a throwback to Picasso's early Cubist artwork. When you go and see this painting, as I mentioned, it's monumental. It's 11 feet 5 inches tall and 6 inches wide, more like a mural. And again, the painting shows the suffering of people and animals wrenched by violence and chaos. When you go to see it, and I've seen it many times, you often find people weeping in front of the piece. It's really that powerful. Here we see another portrait that he created in the analytical Cubism style. It was completed in 1910, and it's in the collection of the Art Institute of Chicago. And the artwork displays brown as its prominent color. To the right, you see another piece, The Card Player, which is at MoMA, New York. And really, Picasso is regarded as one of the most influential artists of the 20th century. He's a co-founder of Cubism, the invention of constructed sculpture, the co-invention of collage, and for the wide variety of styles that he really helped develop and explore. Notice here you see the very monochromatic palette. It's an extremely muted palette of browns, grays. The Three Musicians is at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and it's painted in the style of synthetic cubism, giving the appearance of cut paper. He paints three musicians made of these flat, brightly colored abstract shapes in a shallow box-like room. On the left, there's a clarinet player. Look in the middle, do you see the guitar player? And on the right, a singer who's holding sheets of music. They are dressed as familiar figures. Perrault wearing a blue and white suit, the Harlequin in an orange and yellow diamond patterned costume, and at right a friar in a black robe. In front of Perrault stands a table with a pipe and other objects, while beneath him is a dog whose belly, legs, and tail peep out behind the musician's legs. Like the boxy brown stage on which the three musicians are performing, everything in this painting is made up of flat shapes. Behind each musician, the light brown floor is in a different place, extending much farther toward the left than the right. Framing the picture, the floor and the flat walls kind of make the room look lopsided, but the musicians seem steady. Music makers really in harmony, and it's hard to tell where one musician starts and another stops because the shapes that create them intersect and overlap as if they were paper cutouts. Now, Georges Braque was a major 20th century French painter, collagist, draftsman, printmaker, and sculptor. His most important contributions to the history of art were his alliance with Fauvism from 1905 and the role he played in the development of Cubism with Picasso. Braque's work between 1908 and 1912 is closely associated with his colleague Picasso. Their respective Cubist works were almost indistinguishable for many years, but there's a quiet nature to Braque that was partially eclipsed by the fame and notoriety of Picasso. Here we see a still life with mandala and metronome, which is at MoMA, New York, and then to the right, a still life on a table. Again, the monochromatic palette and the fragmentation and faceting give it away. Here's another beautiful piece he created, and it translates to fruit dish and ace of clubs. Hopefully you see the grapes there in the middle and the cards down below it. Here we see another piece, Rum and Guitar, from 1918. This is Fernand Léger. He was a French painter, sculptor, and filmmaker, and in his early works he created a personal form of Cubism, which he gradually modified into a more figurative populist style. He initially trained as an architect and after military service enrolled in the Beaux Arts Academy. He's got boldly simplified treatment of modern subject matter that caused him to be regarded as a forerunner of pop art. In the middle there we see a still life with the beer mug and another piece to the right that are both really representative of his style. This is my favorite piece that he created, The City. Cubism became a catalyst for experiments that pushed art and design toward geometric abstraction and new attitudes toward pictorial space, like the work of Léger, whose subject matter was really depicted with cylinders, spheres, and cones. You'll find this piece at MoMA, and I live downtown, and I'm always walking to school, so as I walk, I might see a glimpse of a crane or a peeling billboard. It's almost like he took all of these things and combined them into this wonderful flat plane. And I feel that it communicates what being a city is like more effectively than a naturalistic rendering of skyscrapers. It's really a powerful statement about what city life is like. Here we see letter forms in a book he created, La Fin du Monde, The End of the World. And that is being filmed in the story by the angel of the Notre Dame Cathedral. and it pointed the way toward geometric letter forms. He's got these flat planes of color, urban motifs, and the hard-edged precision of his machine forms. Here's another piece from La Fin du Monde. It's a whirlwind tour of the recreation of the earth after the fall of man, is illustrated by a pinwheel of lettering that's spelling accelerated slow motion cinema. Futurism, on the other hand, comes from Italy, and it celebrated violence, speed, machines, modern life, embracing technology, power, and energy. There were manifestos that said, we will destroy the art galleries and museums to liberate Italy from the past. As you know, it has a very rich artistic tradition, such as Renaissance art. Subjects from everyday life projected motion and speed. We see faceted shapes, and it's incredibly dynamic. There are two parts to futurism. There's poetry and graphic works. In your graphic design history journal, you'll feature poetry on the left and graphic works on the right. So make sure that the images on the left side are just of futurism poetry. They're type-based. Then on the right, they're more illustrative and graphic. The stirring manifesto of futurism by Italian poet Filippo Marinetti voiced that enthusiasm, as I mentioned, for war, the machine age, speed, and modern life. He had a lot of followers. Carlo Carra, for example, Giacomo Bella. And they used a painterly typographic design called Parole in Libertà, or Words in Freedom, that really defied correct syntax and grammar to express emotionally charged poetry like a visual work of art. So we see free typography, almost like it could be dropped from a 10-story building and fall randomly wherever it lands. Onomatopoeia, that's words that suggest a sense or an emotion. Simultaneity, in graphic works, letters suggest sounds from different sources heard at once, and in figurative works, the viewer remains stationary and the subject moves. So it's the opposite of cubism. The subject is represented in multiple positions at once. Here we see Filippo Marinetti, the Italian poet, editor, art theorist, and founder of the movement. He's best known for the Futurist Manifesto that he wrote and published in 1909. He also wrote a Fascist Manifesto. It was published in French on the front page of the most prestigious French daily newspaper, Le Figaro, in 1909. In the founding and manifesto of futurism, he declares that art in fact can be nothing but violence, cruelty, and injustice. Georges Sorel, who influenced the entire political spectrum from anarchism to fascism, also argued for the importance of violence. Futurism had both anarchist and fascist elements, and Marinetti later became an active supporter of Benito Mussolini. Marinetti called for a typographic revolution against classical traditions. He developed Words in Freedom, a radical form of writing based on the destruction and reconfiguration of words and sounds. These collage poems contain dispersed text, fragmented words, onomatopoeia, and distorted letters. This particular work is a really great example in which he mixed innovative type with imagery to create a kind of visual and oral symphony. As the woman depicted in the silhouette at the bottom is reading a note from her lover, her artilleryman who's on the front of battle, we see fragments of words, both real and constructed, and distorted in their size, shape, and form, thundering above her, reflecting the sounds of battle, the sounds of war, as well as the futurist fight against typical conventions. Notice you see words like esplosione, that's in Italian. So as you're looking at it, you see clues in language. Notice it also says futurista there. But there's onomatopoeia, that sound up above. It really doesn't mean anything. It's just a sound that you would hear maybe when a bomb is going off. Here we see the work of Carlo Carra. The Futurist poets believed that using different sizes, weights, and styles of type allowed them to weld painting and poetry because of the intrinsic beauty of letter forms. If they were manipulated creatively, you could transform really the printed page into a work of art. This is the work of Apollinaire. He's the inventor of calligram poems through which he explored that fusion of poetry and painting. And he introduced the concept of simultaneity to the time and sequence-bound type of the printed page. In this one, we see figurative typography, and the type is in a shape. At the bottom, it's supposed to be an eye, and then a fountain, and then above it, a bird. On the left, we see another piece by Apollinaire for calligrams, where letter forms sprinkle figuratively down the page. On the right, we see the work of Lewis Carroll. It's a typographic image from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and it's a graphic experiment in figurative typography that's received both design and literary acclaim. Notice that the shape of the type is in the shape of a mouse's tail. Futurism graphic works have geometric patterns, onomatopoeia, a use of words whose sounds suggest a sense emotion, and the machine aesthetic, like automatons or elements suggesting industry. Here's a good example by Fortunato de Pero. On the right, we see a robot. So again, that worship of the machine. And de Pero applied futurist philosophy to graphic and advertising design. He published a compilation of his type experiments, ads, and other works in a publication called Dynamo Azari that I'll show you next. And his work influenced America's movement toward modernism. Take a look at Fortunato de Pero's 1927 masterpiece of graphic design and bookmaking, De Pero Futurista. It's also known as the Bolted Book, and it was kind of a portable museum or calling card, a portfolio of his career to date that included paintings, sculptures, textile and architectural designs, theater and advertising work, word plays, manifestos, and reviews he received in many different languages. It is at the same time a showcase of his skills as a designer and typographical wizard. On the right, we see the 1927 Campari bottle that he designed, an icon of packaging that is still used today. In closing, I wanted you to know that we have a copy of de Pero's Bolted Book, bolts and all, in the graphic design library at City College. So the next time you're on campus, make sure to check it out. So now's a great time to take a break, as I've divided it into two parts. When you're ready, you can listen to Part B, which includes the styles Dada, Surrealism, and Expressionism to round out the influence of modern art. Thanks for listening.